Welcome to Transform Your Workplace. I'm your host, Brandon Laws. Today's episode is brought to you by Xenium HR. Make sure to go sign up for the annual What People Want from Work survey. It's a free employee engagement survey that Xenium runs each year. It's absolutely free. All you need to do is have one representative of your organization sign up. We'll send you all the survey instructions. You send it out to your employees. They take the survey. It asks questions like, how's your company leadership? How's compensation, benefits, your workplace environment, culture, all those things. We'll collect all the feedback by August 30th, and we'll give you a free report that you can take back to your organization and figure out what changes you need to make that will help you transform your workplace in a positive way. Link is in the show notes. We'd love to have you participate. Okay, today's guest is Josh Durham. He's a returning guest. We're picking back up on the Foundational 5 Leadership Series. And in this episode, we're talking about agency and why it's such an important principle in leadership. So I know you're going to enjoy this great discussion. Josh always ends the conversation with a gift of failure where he shares a mistake and how he's learned over the years and what that means in his leadership journey. So you're going to get a lot out of this discussion. I know I did. Always enjoy having a conversation with my friend Josh Durham. Here's the conversation. Josh, it is great to have you back on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Brandon. Great to see you, man.
Well, we're talking about your foundational 5 principles. For those that maybe hearing you for the first time, we've talked about, we did an overview of the principles, and then we talked about agreements, communication, leadership, and today we're talking about agency. And maybe just to start things off, talk about this principle, agency, and how it applies to leadership and why you think it's fundamental for success overall.
Yeah, it's one that I think especially leaders struggle realizing how critical agency is, more than maybe other folks in organizations, but it's, at every level of an organization and in your life, if you don't feel like you have agency, then you're going to really struggle, no matter what. So, and this is one for me, I've gone back and forth in my life, struggling with understanding how much control I really have, versus what I don't have control over to this day. So as a leader, if you don't embody agency, in how you lead people, folks are going to feel lost. And as a leader, if you don't give agency to the other folks that are in your organization, give them trust and agency, then they're going to really struggle to be part of a high-performing team as well. So kind of the subtext, behind this principle, I say, be your own ally, don't sabotage your own objectives, because I really believe, whether folks are ready to admit this or not, we are all our own worst enemy, right? Like, yeah. Golf wouldn't be very hard if that wasn't true, right? There's nothing standing between you and that ball, and it's sitting there.
A lot of it's in the dome, between the ears.
Between the ears, 100%. That's what this principle is all about. And it's great timing for us to talk about it. One, because I just led this principle last week with a group of business owners. It was a great session. And then two, like I said, there's stuff, right now in my life that I'm struggling with, how much control I do or don't have over it. And, I have to give myself pep talks, even to this day. So I think it's a timely one, to be talking about, with you.
Have you always had a strong sense of agency in your leadership style, or is that it developed over time for you?
No, it developed over time. I'm going to tell you a story today about the project where I really started to understand the concept of agency and the benefits of understanding, what you can control and what you cannot, and how well that can benefit your life. So no, for many of the early years in my career, my professional career, I just kind of believed like, all right, well, I got bosses, so I'm just going to do whatever they say and, hope for the best, and didn't take full ownership, in the process, whatever that process was. I think it's a learned skill and one that you have to keep relearning.
Did you learn that skill from other people, or was it a self-reflection and it came from within? Or maybe it's a little bit of both, but I'm curious if just your level of influence is from an external standpoint, maybe mentors and coaches, bosses that you've had allowed you to have a strong sense of agency, or if it was just something that as you grew up, got more experience, that you developed this.
I'd say both, and I've had folks who have been bad examples for me, like, wow, the way they operate, I don't want to operate that way. But then other folks who have really shown me, if you believe that you have control somewhat over your destiny, here are the kind of things that you can get done. And then, then just growing older, as you start to realize these things much more clearly than you do in your 20s or even your 30s, really.
Make this real for me and the listeners as well. So you're from the construction industry. You've worked on some giant projects that many of us listening and me, I've never dealt with in my life. How important is it to have a strong sense of agency when you're working on such projects of that magnitude, where there's a lot of stakes? Having a strong sense of agency, how does it help you, and where would it hurt you not having the strong sense of agency?
When there's a lot of money at stake and a lot of people involved, a lot can go wrong, right? And a lot of these things that are going to go wrong are things that are not in your control, even if you're a leader, right? Even if you're the head boss. You've heard stories about, things that have happened on my projects already that, yes, I'm the senior project manager on the job, and then something terrible happens out in the field that I had absolutely no control over. I, still felt, like I had to own it, right? But if all you do is worry about and absorb all these hiccups, all these problems that are going to happen on large scale projects, whether it's construction or any other sort of project that a team's trying to deliver, you're going to really struggle mentally. And again, I think the story I'll share today will be a great example of that.
Can't wait. We'll get that at the very end. You always have a gift of failure story and top the ones that you've already shared on the other podcasts, but I'm looking forward to it.
I'm leaving water and fire out of this one today. So although there are,
you always got some like dramatic story too. It's like crazy that you've dealt with this stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you think like agency affects a team and culture?
I think it's paramount to a high performing team, right? In the leadership principle that we talked about last time, we discussed those 4 characters that we play in our lives, right? The victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide. And if you have a bunch of folks on your team that are operating with a victim or kind of villain mentality, then they're folks that don't have agency. So folks who do feel like they have agency, those are folks who are going to be in hero mode, which is a transformational mode where they're becoming a better version of themselves, or guide mode, where they're, an empathetic authority, an expert, right? And someone who's willing to share their expertise with other folks on that team. And so agency, I believe, the lack of agency, when you have that kind of energy, you're manifesting a victim or villain mentality. And again, for folks who didn't listen to the leadership principle, I want to clarify, when I say victim, I'm not talking about folks who are real victims in this world, right? Folks who've had social injustices or terrible crimes committed against them, those are real victims. The victim I'm talking about is, everyone already knows, is that woe is me. I don't even want to get out of bed today because life is hard.
Yeah, everything's happening to me. It's not my fault. It's like that kind of thing.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. I have no control, right? And then when I'm talking about a victim or a villain, I'm not talking about someone who wants to go out and rob a bank or do something awful. I'm talking about the cynic. I'm talking about someone who, has, self-doubt, someone who's an over perfectionist. That's all the kind of villain mentality that I'm talking about there. I always like to clarify that because people hear those words and, they put them through their own filter. So
when conflict arises, and it always does in the workplace and in any project, regardless if you're perfect or not, and are a great leader or not, how does agency help you get through that conflict in your experience?
I think agency helps de-escalate conflict. I'll explain more here in a second what agency really means to me. But if folks understand, that they don't control everything that's happening, right? And if it rains on your birthday, that's completely out of your control, right?
That actually happened for you. Happy 40th.
Twice, right? Yeah. So things like that. But if folks don't feel like they have any control, and are operating in that kind of victim or villain mentality, the discussions and conflicts are going to be more escalated and volatile because they don't feel safe. And when someone doesn't feel safe, that means their survival instincts kick in. The fight or flight portion of the brain is triggered, the sympathetic system, and they're going to be more combative when there is conflict, right? If folks do feel safe, which means they do feel like they have agency and they have control under things, and they're less worried about the things they don't have control over, their parasympathetic system is going to be triggered, which is where intuitive thought lives in the brain, and calmness and safeness. And so while there's still going to be conflict and problems, it's going to be less volatile. And I can think of, a few key leaders in my time where they've been doing it for 25, 30, 35 years. And, I would be in meetings with them and either a client or, some vendor, and they just stayed cool the entire time. And I'm over here on the other side of the table, just shaking, like so angry, right? I would ask them, like, how do you stay so calm? And it's that mentality that they understand, like, look, the meeting was going to go how it was going to go. And, me losing my cool over something that isn't an issue we caused, or, isn't a problem that, we can solve on our own, it's not moving the ball forward. And that kind of perspective I really started to understand, like, wow, what a way more productive way to move through conflict.
Yeah. This principle stands different to me for a lot of reasons. I think inexperienced leaders are naturally going to have a lack of agency.
Yep.
Just because they haven't been through it. And I'm sure early in your career, you sense like, you're on big projects that you've never done before, and you probably felt a little out of control. Whereas you're around seasoned leaders who are like, this is a regular thing, man. I've got it under control. This is just the way it is. Where did you see transformation in yourself with agency? And am I right in suggesting that like newer leaders tend to have a lack of agency because of lack of world experience?
I believe you're right. Yeah. And, just based on my own experience, when I went from managing a $5 million job to a $300 million job almost overnight. And, I was like, oh my God, I was terrified. And I just wanted to do a good job, but I didn't have that confidence, that agency, because I had never done that before. Right. But now, you throw me a, $500,000 job, and I'm like, okay, or a $500 million job, a $500 million job. And sure, let's go. And that's not because I'm, smarter than anybody. It's just, I've been down that road. I understand more so, what I can control on delivering projects. And I focus really hard on those things that I can control and that my team can control, and much less so now on all those other things that are in the outer atmosphere, if you will.
Just like any of these other principles we've talked about, these can all be developed. These are soft skills that can be learned. Experience obviously helps develop in all of these principles. Agency is no different, but are there any tools or resources that you've come across or practices that would help you develop agency faster? It seems like a harder one to.
It's a hard one.
Let's do this assessment and then I'll do these tools. It just doesn't seem. It seems like you need experience and to go through it and to have a lot of self-reflection as you're going through it in order to develop agency.
Yeah, in the agency principle for folks who are taking the class, the tools we give them in this particular principle are somewhat different than the other ones because they are some very hands-on tools. Two specific ones are how to track and control overhead costs in your business, which doesn't matter what kind of business you are, you have overhead costs, and it can ruin businesses if it's out of your control and you don't understand it. So we give them a real tool to track overhead costs appropriately. And then the other tool that we give them is a really in-depth review of how to control a project schedule, whether it's a construction project or, again, any other sort of project. There is a schedule, there's a domino effect, there's logic to how things have to get done. And we show folks the core principles of how to successfully schedule out your work. Because agency is such a more abstract, I think, principle than the other ones, we're focusing here on, like, here's some real tools that will give you control. These are things that you can control in your projects and in your business. And if you implement these will help you start to form agency around a couple of really core things that you need to be good at in your company.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it too, because I guess I didn't think about it. I was thinking more like agency from a confidence and control and like, we've got this, versus like the other side of that is like processes and standard operating procedures and things like that. In the HR industry, we've worked with a lot of different organizations that a lot of them are owner operated, and so that owner is like they've got complete agency, they've got control over everything, but they haven't documented processes and putting guardrails in place so others could have agency.
Right. And that's why we focus on the processes. We're trying to help people become, kind of masters of their craft, whatever it is. Right. And so if you got the processes down, you're going to feel like you have more control and more agency in the business. And that allows you to elevate yourself, as a leader. Even if you're the owner of a company, if everything feels out of control with the processes and the things you need to be good at as an organization, you're not going to have agency. And so that's why, particularly in this principle, we're trying to, install a few key tools in these organizations so that the processes are more under control.
What's the interplay of like agency versus the other principles? Like, how do those connect?
I mean, all five of them, connect through the concept of purpose-driven leadership. That's the string we kind of tie between all five principles. And I tell you, if you're missing agency in your life, the other four principles are going to be really tough to master, right? We go to agency right before relationships, because if you're operating with an external locus of control, which I'll explain here in a second, your relationships are going to be very challenging. And you're going to be blaming everyone else that you're in a relationship with, whether it's a professional or personal relationship, for your problem. So we like to go to agency, and explain why it's so critical. And then we jump to principle number 5, relationships, right after that.
How do you think like the role of agency plays in the future leader? And do you think this is like vital to like becoming a leader in this crazy future that we're entering, like with technology and relationships that are like overly connected but seemingly disconnected because of technology? It's just the modern day leader has it pretty tough, and I imagine it's a different set of skills that are going to be required over the next decade.
I'm going to start sounding like an old man here, but
we are old.
But I think we're living in a time now where folks feel like they have less agency and control over their lives than ever before. And we have more access to information than we ever had before too. And maybe that's not a good thing. I don't know. That might be a counterculture thing to say, but you just take the nightly news, right? You want to, get really worried about all sorts of things you can't control really quick. Just flip on, the, nightly world news, and you will start to lose your agency really fast, right? So yes, as new leaders are, getting into these roles in their organizations, I don't think they're going to start off with a whole lot of agency, but if they at least understand the concept of it, especially this locus of control concept here we'll talk about, and at least aspire to it and use it as a constant reminder, have this concept in front of you constantly, at least they'll have an opportunity to grow into someone who feels like they have ownership and agency over a great deal of their life.
What inspired you around this principle? Like, why did you choose this in your foundational 5?
It was part of the story of my life. Really, the story I'm going to tell today is from one of my older projects. So the other ones I've told are, more recent times. And this one happens, almost 12 years ago now or more.
Do you want to just get into the story? I mean,
we certainly can. But when I went through that process or that project and finally, gained some ownership into my career and in my life, it felt like it's a principle I had to share, right? That's why, it's in the module. I think maybe before we go to the story itself, I want to talk a little bit about external locus of control. Well, locus of control. So this is not a concept Josh made up yet again.
I think that comes from Stephen Covey's work, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I believe, right?
He talks about it, yes, but it's actually...
Or maybe somebody else created that before him, but that's where I read it first.
Yep. Yeah. So Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, is the world-renowned psychologist. He's written several books, but the one where he really dives into this concept is called Man's Search for Meaning. A heavy book, but I recommend it.
Heavy book, but meaningful.
Yeah, very, very meaningful. And while he's in the concentration camps, he had already written his manuscripts on this concept, and then those manuscripts got taken away, and he had to rewrite all of them, this entire locus of control concept. And it's based on all his case studies with his own, patients. So this this concept has been around for about 90 years. So it's, and then folks have expanded on it and written many more books on it. Like you said, so that's where it comes from. Just for listeners here, I'll give the definition for folks before we talk about the difference here. So the locus of control refers to an individual's perception about the underlying main causes of events in their life. More simply put, do you believe that your destiny is controlled by yourself and your actions, or by external forces such as fate or God or some powerful deity or Elon Musk or whatever, right? So that's locus of control. So then there's the two types: external locus of control and then internal locus of control. So external locus of control, if you have an external locus of control mindset, you're operating in that way, you likely believe that what happens to you is the result of luck or fate, or is determined by other people instead of yourself. All right. And again, we've all been there. And then the opposite of that, internal locus of control, when you're operating with an internal locus of control, you believe that to a great degree, your own behaviors, actions, and decisions are key factors to determining what happens to you in your life, right? Rather than external forces. So when I boil it down, there's two things in this life. There's things that you can control, and there's things that you cannot control. Like I said, I talk about this in the class, and I've been challenged on that, by folks before, which is okay. I want it to be an open discussion, and I say, okay, well, give me an example. And every single example they've given me, where life's more complicated than that, I can always bring it back to either that's something you could control or something you cannot. And I tell you, the list of things we cannot control is a heck of a lot longer than the things that we can control. The things we can control are our actions and our attitudes that we bring every day.
I think what is coming up to mind for me is that this is just purely a mindset shift for people. And I think that's like, things will happen to it. There's no doubt. But are there things that we can do on the margin if we shifted our mindset to say, we actually have more control than we think, and therefore I'm in control of my destiny? Things will still continue to happen, positive or negative, from external forces. But I think what you're saying is, if you find a way to fundamentally shift your mindset to more of an internal locus of control, your life is going to probably be a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And there's a lot of clinical studies that have been done on this. And, what I tell folks is, if you can stay above 50% of the time operating with an internal locus of control mindset, you're going to be way better off. Because I think it's impossible to live in 100% of your time in internal locus of control mindset. The world is too complicated for that, and I think you'd just be exhausted. You're going to go back and forth. But what the clinical studies have shown is, folks who operate with an internal locus of control mindset, ultimately, they're more prosperous. They make more money. They have stronger relationships and more relationships. Their overall health and lifespan is longer, right? And then you look at the numbers and the stats for folks who are operating with the external locus of control mindset more often than not. It's the opposite, of course. They typically aren't as prosperous. Their relationships are more damaged, and they struggle with them more. They don't live as long because of all that stress that they are carrying around all the time. And then ultimately they have a higher rate of suicide, which is that's how serious this is, and I know that's
100%.
Yeah, it's a heavy word to bring into your podcast, I know, but that's just how important this principle is.
Yeah, it is. Let me make this real for you, because I discovered something recently that I think this ties in nicely. So, I mean, just like you, I'm thinking about a million different things, and I do feel out of control sometimes because of not even just like my work, but just, life stuff. Like, I got to pay the bills. I've got to do this, whatever. Like, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of inputs. I mean, if you're connected to social media and you're watching the news, that adds a whole different layer, right? And so at one point, I'm pretty stressed out. I'm honestly talking to my doctor about just like stress levels and stuff. And she was like, go check out Andrew Huberman's. There's like a 10-minute and a 20-minute. It's like essentially a body scan reset, but it gets you to focus. And I'm like butchering this, but it gets you to focus at a level where you're just in tune to your breathing and you're focusing on one thing at a time, that it resets your entire body. So I was sitting here at my computer completely like frazzled. Like, I was just like a million things on my mind, probably on a bunch of video calls, and just feeling like a little out of control. Right. So I decided to give this a shot. I found it on YouTube as a 10-minute body. Basically, it's a non-sleep body scan. And there was one point in particular where like you're focused on your breathing, and it was Andrew Huberman's like, okay, imagine there's a spotlight and you're shining it right on your foot. Feel your foot, and then move up along the way and focus on different parts of your body. Well, that in itself, because you're so deep focused on one area, when I was done with it, I could care less about anything in the world at that point. My brain completely reset, and I felt so in control after that point.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. You hear about, box breathing and, the Navy SEALs, do, breathing exercise, even when they're on mission. Right. And I'm not surprised to hear you say those results, because what you did was you turned off the sympathetic part of your brain, the fight or flight part, and you moved your nervous system into a parasympathetic mode where you're calm. Right. So it's amazing. Breathing is an amazing thing. I'm learning more and more about it all the time. It's the only autonomous part of our nervous system, our body, that we can control, right? Every other thing, the heartbeat, all the other things that just happen automatically in our body, breathing is one that happens automatically, but we can also control it. And that's, it's a key tool that folks use to calm themselves down. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's just going back to the locus of control. I think that's like one of the most important things in this discussion, is just knowing that if we can shift our mindset to one of internal locus of control, we're going to feel better. We'll probably have less stress. Things will go better.
Yeah, I believe so. It's proven time and time again for me. So I believe it's going to benefit anyone who's able to move themselves back into an internal locus of control mindset, whether it's in your personal life or professional life again.
All right, get into your gift of failure story. I know you want to disappoint on this one.
I'll try. Okay, so this one's old enough too. I'll speak more openly about the project. So I'm going to tell folks, the story of Sandy High School, which, Brandon, you probably remember me driving out to Sandy for almost 3 years and building this.
A long drive for you.
Long drive, yeah. Something I couldn't control, right? Unless I wanted to, move.
That was when we were in our early 20s too, wasn't it? That was like one of your first big projects.
Yeah, early mid 20s.
Mid 20s probably. Yeah.
Yep. So
you're a newer leader.
Yeah, very, very new leader. I'll try to keep this as short as I can. But how this started was I was still finishing an office tower in downtown Portland, First and Main. Beautiful office tower, and 18 stories, a pretty big project, but actually a pretty easy project on the grand scheme of things. It doesn't make it into my principles for gift of failure stories. So we're finishing that job up, and we're finishing this project up in early 2008. And if you remember what happened in 2008, the housing crisis.
A Great Recession.
Yeah, the Great Recession, right? And so it was kind of a bizarre time to be building in downtown Portland, because we were the only construction project of any size or real scale happening at that time. It was pretty crazy. And my company was talking about some force reductions for the first time in really in their history that, anyone could remember. And, I'm a younger project engineer, which is kind of the step right below project manager in the construction world. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, maybe this is it. After this job is done, maybe that's the end of my construction career. I only had about 5 years under my belt, and I thought maybe I'm going to get cut. And then we got an email from our marketing team, a great email. It said, hey team, hey everybody, company-wide email. We just won the Sandy High School project out in Sandy, Oregon. Huge win for the company, right? Because my previous company and, really all construction companies at the time didn't have a lot of work. There just wasn't a lot of work. And so, Sandy High School was, a fully funded, publicly bonded project. So every contractor in the state, was going after this thing.
Yeah,
and,
right.
My company won. So we're all like, yeah, right. Right in the job site trailer, we all, celebrated and we're high-fiving. Great news. Like, that's going to keep a lot of people busy. But I wasn't part of that pursuit at all. And then in my mind, I'm like, wow, I wonder who the sorry saps are that are going to have to drive out to Sandy for, 2.5 or 3 years and go build that thing. And I swear it wasn't that much later. All of a sudden I get a phone call from, my main office, and it's one of the vice presidents. Great man. He's since passed on, but great man I didn't know very well at that point. And he says, hey, Josh, how's it going? I'm like, oh, hi, sir. It's going fine. He's like, well, hey, look, here's the deal. You probably just saw the email that went out. we're going to be sending you out to Sandy to go be part of that project team. I'm like, oh man, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, wow, that is so far from where I live. But then I'm like, okay, hey, I got a job. That's great. And he's like, you're going to be the lead engineer on it. And I was, wow, I just got a promotion too, so he's like, so finish the project you're on right now, and then, get your butt out to Sandy and start building that thing. And I want you to know this is a mission critical project for the company. You got the backing of the entire company. We're going to give you the best crews, so on and so forth. And so he's like, so go out there and kick butt. And I'm like, okay, sir, got it. Right. And, I got the cape unfurls from my back and, I feel like I'm in hero mode. Right. And so I get out to Sandy, myself and the superintendent, my counterpart. And, we're only out there for a couple of weeks, studying the drawings, putting together a work plan and all that. And we're reviewing the conceptual schedule that was put together by other folks in our company for the proposal. And we realized that it's written completely backwards. The way that it was put together, you couldn't have built the building that way because this building had an 80-foot grade change from one end to the other on a 75-acre site. It's built into this clay hill. And it was originally, planned to be built from the top. But if you did that, the building would slide down the hill without a ton of like temporary bracing and all that kind of fun stuff I won't bore your listeners with. So you had to build up. You had to go from the bottom up and build retaining walls along the way. And myself and my superintendent kind of realized this at about the same time. We're like, oh, no, that's not good. And we were also sending this schedule out to subcontractors to get bids from everybody. And it was going out like the next day. So it wasn't enough time to rewrite a 30-page, construction schedule to get it out for this bid. So this backward schedule was going out. So then the next day, our project manager comes in and says, hey, we need to sit down and talk about the budget. And we're like, great, because we need to talk about the schedule too. And so we sit down, the three of us, and he says, well, listen, we made a business decision when we were pursuing this work, and, we cut our fee by $500,000 when we submitted the bid. And we're like, oh my gosh, that is so much money. That was about a quarter of our fee, our profit on that project. It's kind of the cushion that we had, right? But we understood, like, slim times. So we needed this job. And so the company made a business decision, but it really put us in a tough spot to have that much money taken out of, the project before we were even starting. And we said, okay, well, that's terrible news. Let us tell you about this schedule that you just put out. And we're like, it's backwards, completely backwards. It can't be built that way. His jaw drops. And the three of us are just sitting there staring at each other like, oh my gosh, this is a tough start. But, we kind of rally ourselves. We say, hey, we said, the company said, this is mission critical. We're going to get the best concrete crews, and there's time. And, we got the backing of the entire company. We're fine. We got people covering us. So we can fix this. And so we did reverse the schedule. We couldn't do anything about the budget. The budget was what it was.
Yeah. You're just trying to work within that.
Trying to work within it. Yeah. And we got the schedule reversed, and then, got the subcontractors all signed up, and we start building. And we got the best concrete crew that our company had to offer. We were self-performing the concrete ourselves, and we got the best foremen, best superintendents. And we just started building up this big clay hill. And we were thing looks like an airport from the top. So it's got like wings, the terminals on it, basically. And we gave each of these great concrete, leaders a wing and said, you go this wing, you go that wing, you're going to race up the hill. Make sure you do it safely, but, let's go. And they were kicking butt, right? And we're like, that's awesome. Like, this is going well. And then terrible news comes in over the email again from, our main office. Hey team, hey everybody, another all company email. We just won $1 billion project out in Hillsborough for a high tech company. And, myself and my superintendent were sitting right next to each other when we got the email, and we looked at each other and we said, oh, fudge. But we didn't say fudge. And because we knew what that meant. That meant that we were going to lose
a lot of your good people.
A lot of good people. Yeah. Because, and again, a business, you got $1 billion job versus $100 million job.
Intel?
I can't say.
Okay.
It was a high-tech company in Hillsborough, so people can do the math. And so, but we're thinking like, okay, like it's not starting right away. We got some time. Hopefully they can get the concrete done and then go out there. But I tell you, I've never seen a concrete crew demobilize faster from a job site than that. And, again, like you can't just put those people out on $1 billion job the day before you start pouring concrete. They need to be out there to plan the work and all that. So after just a few weeks after this announcement, we lost all these great foremen and leaders on our job, and we were left with a skeleton crew. And myself and my superintendent are standing there at the top of this clay hill looking at each other just like, wow, now what? We're screwed. We thought we had the backing of the entire company, right? And now we're left out here in Sandy by ourselves, it felt like. And that's when I became the president of pity parties. And I think my superintendent was the vice president. And we threw ourselves a lot of pity parties, so many pity parties out there in Sandy. And frankly, I saw the bottom of too many bottles out there in Sandy, because I was playing the victim. And our little team was, we all felt like we were victims and just got left behind. The island of misfit toys is what we felt like. And we felt really, really sorry for ourselves. And we didn't start working on solutions right away. We just kind of started nursing through the project with this skeleton crew, and milestones and big, schedule dates were, flying by us, and we were getting more and more behind schedule and more over budget. And I got to the point where I was working, 12, 14-hour days for not a couple of days or a couple of weeks, but for months. And I was sleeping at the job site because it didn't make sense for me to drive home and turn around and get back there at 6 a.m. the next day. It was taking a major toll on me. I had challenges in my personal life going on then too. And so it was a really trying time for me as a person. And I felt very sorry for myself. And it got to the point where I was sitting out there at the project on a Sunday afternoon, feeling completely overwhelmed. And I just wrote my resignation letter. And I sent it in to that same vice president who called me, who said I was going to have the backing of the entire company. And I just sent it to him, said I'm done. Wasn't a negotiating tactic. It wasn't anything like that. I was really I was cooked. I wasn't healthy mentally or physically. And I thought I just needed out. Thought that would solve all my problems. And I got a call from him the next day right away. And he said, hey, whoa, what's going on? And I said, well, what do you mean what's going on? The company took away all of our great concrete crew. And, you said we had the backing of the entire company. And, we've just been left out here on this island. And I said, I'm done. I'm just done. And he said, Josh, you can't quit. And I said, well, I don't know what else to do. I feel hopeless. And he said, okay, well, tell me what you need. And I said, I had a long list of demands, right? And he listened and he empathized with me very well. He let me get heated, but he never got heated. At the end of it, he's like, okay, all those things make sense, but you know that I can't do all those things, right? And I said, yeah, I get that. And he said, so what do you really want? What is it in this moment that you need more than anything? I said, okay, well, if I had to choose one thing, I know that there's this other great project engineer who's finishing up a job in Portland, and I know you want to send him to Hillsborough for this big job. Don't send him to Hillsborough. Send him to me. We need help. We only had 3 salaried employees managing this $100 million job, which would now be a $300 million job, by the way. So we were incredibly understaffed. And I said, please send him to me. And so he said, okay, I commit to you. You're going to get that person. And I'm going to recommit to you that I will re-engage in the project. I'll come out. I'll be out there, every other week if you need me, or every week if you need me. And he did. He followed through on that commitment. And he sent me this person. So now our staff was a group of 4, which wasn't a bunch, but that was the cavalry, right? And when that other person showed up, at least I felt like, hey, half the stack of paper that's 3 feet high next to my desk, you can at least take half of it, right? And I started to feel a little bit of relief. And then, a couple of weeks after that person got, into the group and kind of familiarized with the project, all of us sat down around a table, all 4 of us sat down around a table, and we looked at each other and said, hey, that's the cavalry. No one else is coming. We did add another person much later in the project, but at that moment in time, that's all the help we knew we were going to get. So we looked at each other and we agreed, we got to own this, or this is going to go really, really bad. Now, the project itself never got any easier. It's a really challenging project, and anyone who's ever been through that high school will understand what I'm talking about. It is not your cookie cutter high school. It looks like an airport when you walk through it. It's incredible. I still call it the Taj Mahal High School. But in that moment, we all agreed, like, this is our baby. We have to take ownership in this. You're going to take that area of the building. You're going to take that area of the building. You're going to take that area of the building. We split it up like that geographically. And we said, don't come out unless you're dying or you really need help. And then we kept an eye on each other, right? We kept an eye on each other. We had each other's backs when there were problems and challenges, which there obviously were in a big project like that. And we had no right finishing that project on time, but we did. And we had no right making any money on that project, but we still did. And that's because at the end of the day, we finally took ownership in this thing, and we gave it everything that we had. And we didn't worry about the fact that we went from being the star project to the forgot about project, right? We just focused on the job and did our job as a team.
What an incredible story. Like one of transformation. Totally different mindset, because once you realize that like this is the team, we got to take ownership, otherwise this project's not going to be easy. And you still said it wasn't easy, but it's not going to get easier. You're probably like mindset wise, you're probably going to go in the dumps. You're already there,
right?
But once you took ownership, probably got a little easier, and you probably were able to rely on the team and each other a lot more
and more fun. Like it was a really hard job, but we had a hell of a time once we took agents. Some of those people came to my wedding, it was a, destination wedding, right? And we became very close friends, and not just our little project team, but also, became very close with the architecture team, the design team, and even the school district as well, because they could see like, wow, these folks are giving it everything they got. And they wanted to be part of, the solutions to help us get where we needed to be as well, because they could see that, we were taking ownership in it as well. So it was really hard, but, it's still, if not my favorite project, one of my very favorite projects, just because of, once we took ownership in this thing, how much fun we really had and how close we all got together.
Well, good stuff, Josh. Today's principle was agency. Next time you're on, we'll talk about relationships. It's been so awesome having you on the podcast. We'll put links and all that stuff to all your work, all the other podcasts as well, so people go back and listen to those if they haven't already. But just really appreciate you for just being vulnerable, and it's raw and it's real, and just appreciate you just sharing some pretty incredible stories, quite frankly. Like most people would never go through anything like that.
Yeah, I'm happy to share them. I know there's a lot more people that have stories like me. I just happen to be willing to share them. But because I want folks to learn, from these things, and, life and careers are always going to be hard, but they don't have to be quite as hard as the stories I've told. That's why I'm willing to share them.
Thanks for coming on, Josh.
Great seeing you, Brandon.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.